Trove's combat and how you build classes can be broken up into 3 categories. Speed farming, where you're trying to complete dungeons as fast as possible, which means you need to have a class that has a good base movement speed and you will be sacrificing damage for more speed. Delves, which is a combination of damage and health. In most cases, you need to be really tanky to be able to survive the long, drawn-out gauntlet. And Leviathans are all about damage. You don't need to survive if you can kill it before it kills you. The efficiency of a class can basically be broken down into these 3 categories. Some will be stronger than others in one area and weaker in another. Another video of mine that I would recommend is the classes cheat sheet. It's basically a visual graph that kind of shows where each character fits in the spectrum. At the end of it all, I would always recommend that you play the class that you enjoy, rather than picking something specifically because it's efficient. So assuming you've picked out your main, let's get started with the more detailed tutorial. Lunar Lancer is another fantastic speed farmer, even though it's not particularly good in the delves. It's not entirely because the class doesn't have damage, it's most of all because of the lengthy animations of all of your abilities. Like when you do your number 1 ability, you're basically floating in the air doing nothing unless you can grapple down, but sometimes the grappling hook doesn't work because it's Trove. I've also had it before where my character gets completely locked in his animations. But because the grappling hook has so much range, this is what makes this class really, really good when it comes to speed farming. Not only can you reach really high vertical areas without needing any of the jump mounts in the game, but there's a little bit of a tech trick you can do. If you grapple to something and jump last second, you can keep the momentum for a little while. I'd like to point out I'm not even rocking gear with max movement speed right now. So as far as the subclass ability is concerned, it's pretty much just going to be the same old across the board, with Solarian being the one that gives you the most damage because of the light value, but Bard is another one that I've heard people suggest, although I don't particularly like it because it's very random which abilities you'll end up obtaining from it. The one I always go for in most cases is the Knight, just because of the mount movement speed, but in Lunar Lancer's case, your movement speed is so ridiculously high, you don't really need it. Although I do still take it just because of the extra Flask capacity, because that's going to be able to trigger trailblazing and such. As far as your gear stat priority, it depends how you want to play this character. In most cases, you would just go for movement speed and attack speed, because your base attack is, for the most part, going to be where you're going to deal a lot of your damage, just because of how broken the other abilities can be. I don't mean broken in a good way, I mean they barely function. But if you absolutely want to try and use this class in, say, the delves or even at the end game, you would simply swap the movement speed off for crit damage. Now, for the Lunar Lancer's crystal ring effects, you have From the Moon. When in lunar form, basic attacks have a chance to spawn meteors from the sky, which is good for additional damage if you want to be all about damage. Cliffhanger, dodging lowers the cooldown of the grappling and the empowered grapple. This ability also has its own internal short cooldown. And lastly, Need for Speed. After using the buffed grapple, gain a speed buff instead of an attack buff. For my money, the Need for Speed is where the Lunar Lancer shines, because this is one of the fastest classes in the game. The best banner and slot is going to end up being the torches from Leviathans, with the permatorch being the best one, and I always craft the Knotted Shadow one because of that extra movement speed it gives. Now, you do have a couple different options for allies. The Mini Fire Mana Beast is going to be your best option in terms of raw damage. So starting from the hub, you would go down here into the fishing area, and the Mystic Arts table is going to be right here. All the way down at the bottom is going to be where you craft the Fire Beast, which I still don't have yet. But Scorpius is going to be the best in most cases just because of that movement speed. So from the hub coming over here is going to end up being the Grand Orrery, and over here is going to be Scorpius, which in most cases you'll just naturally get because you need that light node anyways. Speaking of the skill tree, you're gonna start out with the life leech node, which is gonna make you almost invincible with every class in the game. The movement speed nodes I prioritize very, very much. The light nodes and the damage nodes. As far as your Flask is concerned, these are pretty much the best options in the game. Use whichever one you want. I personally use Death Defying just because survivability is important to me. Most of all, it's because I'm lazy and I don't want to have to flash when I get low health. But otherwise, Conjurer's Crucible is a good one just because it'll restore as you trigger Magic Find, which if you have high enough Magic Find can be really, really good for long-term farming. The Elysium Bandolier is also a good one if you just absolutely need to spam your emblems. Speaking of your emblems, unfortunately, you'll never be able to get rid of Martial Emblem just because of the way that Trove is right now, unless you're like super end game and you go down a couple biomes. So in most cases, you would always have this. With your secondary emblem, I would use Trailblazing just because of the movement speed. Again, that's what I would prioritize on Lunar Lancer. But some other really good ones would be Unyielding Emblem just for survivability, gives you a little bit more tankiness. Sure Strike's also a really good one if you have low crit hit. The mid-game stat goal that you should be focusing on is around 80k physical damage, 800% crit damage, and 50 to 60% crit hit. You're trying to move up from there, and in most cases, you want to try and prioritize getting your crit hit to 100% first. That said, I wouldn't worry too much about like specifying where your stats should be at, just because once you get to the end game, your stats are going to kind of even out anyway. Now, before we end up getting into my gems, I do gotta mention, as always, are you level 30? That's the main thing that I always see. People always asking, how do I increase my power rank and so on and so forth. Bro, you gotta be level 30 so that you can equip all of your gems, because your gems are gonna give you the most power. This is also not a video for coefficiency. I'm trying to make these as digestible as possible, and coefficiency is very, very different for each different class because each class has their own varying stats. So if you'll pardon me, I'm gonna swap to my Shadow Hunter while we look at my gems here. For your 3 colored empowered gems, because cosmic gems are their own category, I would focus on getting 2 boosts physical damage, 1 boost crit damage, no boost crit hit. Try to understand the words that are coming out of my mouth rather than the visual indicator, because I've been swapping my gem boosters around a lot on my Shadow Hunter. And again, so that this video is easy to understand, you're going to have 3 of your lesser gems be the exact same. So 2 boost physical, 1 boost crit damage, no boost crit hit. And then the other 3 colored gems will be 2 boost crit damage, 1 boost physical, no boost crit hit. Of course, once you get to 100% crit hit, you can swap crit hit off to max health. And your cosmic gems, well, all 3 of them are gonna be the same. You want every single boost that you can get into light, and then the additional stats will be crit damage and physical damage. As for the empowered gem abilities, you definitely want to have the class gem because they actually ended up buffing your shadow clone like, I don't know, a year ago or something like that, and it's surprisingly really, really powerful now. Basically, by attacking enemies, you have a chance of spawning a shadow clone, which unfortunately is really, really dumb and won't track enemies very well. But when it starts attacking hard. Other options could be Stinging Curse, I don't know, Cubic Curtain if you need survivability, but Pyro Disc I would say is the only one you should really try to get. And as for your cosmic gems, you have 2 different abilities. You have Vampirium, which you're not really gonna need the lifesteal, but Vampirium does give you a movement speed boost. So if you absolutely wanna prioritize speed with your Lancer, you could use Vampirium. But if you're getting to the end game and the enemies are way too tanky, you're going to need to use Berserk Battler instead, just because of the light stat it gives you. And that's about gonna do it, ladies and gentlemen. Usually I like taking a moment to kind of talk with you guys more candidly about stuff behind the scenes, which more particularly is just the fact that these videos are few and far between. I know I always say that, but in this case, I kind of feel bad that I didn't have many Trove videos this week. It's because the wife and I have just been going through a lot of real life stuff, which I'll hopefully have a video that'll talk about it all very soon. Suffice to say, it's really exciting, but I haven't been able to share it with you guys yet. And with all that said, ladies and gentlemen, I would appreciate if you would smash like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit that notification bell, not necessarily in that order, but sharing the video is also very, very helpful for me. The channel's kind of stopped as soon as we ended up hitting like 200k subscribers. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know what do I say? Is it my fault? Is it YouTube's fault? I don't know. Point being, I appreciate you watching the video regardless, and I hope you enjoyed it.